You know what? I'm finally gonna do it. I'm finally gonna do it. I'm finally going to live up to this channel's name and actually freak out about some elements. Crazy, I know, it only took a year and a half to get to this moment. Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four elements lived in harmony. Then everything changed when Dmitri Mendeleev decided to take up carpentry and make a table. The classical elements are one of the oldest tropes in fiction, and one of the most widespread as well, showing up in everything from D&D to zodiac signs to Nicholas Flamel to Minecraft mods to Scooby-Doo. The concept that the world could be broken down into fundamental building blocks began with the elements, carrying an abundance of philosophical and cultural influence since before Christ was a thing. From a modern Eurocentric perspective, these four icons of natural philosophy may seem pretty well set in stone. But across centuries of human development and storytelling, there has been quite the variation in what was considered to fill the role of the elements. Some of these framing choices gave rise to interesting dynamic shifts that reflect the societies that made them, while others are just symbols and buzzwords slapped on a DeviantArt page from the mid-2000s. I am creating this video series with the goal of examining the idea of an element from top to bottom. I want to come to an understanding of what these ideas mean, why they have had such longevity and flexibility across academic and artistic mediums, what roles they fulfill, and why the subjects chosen by ancient cultures to be the foundations of the universe were what they were. My analysis will take place across potentially 5 videos. In this first video, I will explore human antiquity to find the roots of elemental philosophy. This will provide cultural and historical context to the development of elemental systems across time. Our story, like most things of importance, begins with the Greeks. Early Greek philosophy sought out the concept of arche, which translates something close to origin or original argument. Essentially, they wanted to know what the most basal governing principle of the universe was. This was expressed as an ultimate underlying substance that shaped the nature of reality. Sometime around 750 to 650 BC, the Greek poet Hesiod ascribed chaos as arche, a sort of formless and empty void that filled the universe in its first conditions. In his modern day, this chaos would be found as the space separating the heavens and earth. Later, Thales of Miletus, from 620 to 540 BC, otherwise recognized as the father of Western philosophy, would purport water as arche, given its capacity to change in form. To a Mediterranean dweller, water was ever present in the world, seeming that even the world itself was floating on an ocean. Seeing its necessity for life and how the water cycle reflects the innate change of human nature, it's not hard to imagine it fulfilling such a position in a cosmic hierarchy. Thales had a student called Anaximander who would refute his theory in favor of a concept more akin to Hesiod's chaos, which Anaximander called apeiron, which is really fun to say as ape iron. Because water is unable to give rise to fire, nor fire to water, nor air to earth, or vice versa, none of these material substances could be solely responsible for the universe. Thus, apeiron was an endless, infinite substance from which all came and to which all would return. Then Anaximander's student, Anaximenes, would double back again to the elemental theory, but with air as the single basal substance. And then Heraclitus in 500 would say fire was the avatar of change and therefore arche. Empedocles would finally put an end to this nonsense in the 5th century BC by introducing the idea that there was more than one basal substance, the 4 roots as he called them. Of course, these were fire, earth, water, and air. All matter was composed in some combination of these roots and acted upon by 2 basic forces: love, which brings the roots together, and strife, which separates them apart. The behavior of the roots, as well as the asymmetricality of the universe, was explained by these attractive and repulsive forces. Air and fire were attracted upwards, the direction of the sky and the heavenly stars, while earth and water were attracted downwards, to the oceans and ground. Like attracts like. Empedocles' writings introduced rudimentary concepts that bear a marked similarity to scientific theories that wouldn't be developed for thousands of years. His 4 roots laid the direct basis for atomism, and their behaviors an explanation for gravity, but he also believed that the universe began as an infinitely tight ball of love that exploded into strife, forming everything around us. Stranger still, in a mockery of natural selection, he believed life began with disembodied body parts randomly assembling into strange amalgamations, the most sensible of which would survive to reproduce and continue life. He also introduced the idea that light takes time to pass from one point to another, meaning that this man was the ultimate machine for pumping out certified banger proto-scientific theories. He also threw himself into a volcano to try and become a god, so take this information as you will. However, the term element as we know it was introduced by Plato shortly after, called stoichion, from stoichio, to line up, or the smallest division of a syllable. Continuing the long line of students piling on this multi-century group project, it was Aristotle who would assign 4 sensible qualities divided among the elements as this. Fire is hot and dry, air is hot and wet in its vaporous form, water is cold and wet, and earth is cold and dry. Aristotle noticed that, at least from their perspective, the heavens were unchanging across time. Seeing as basically all of what the material elements on Earth did was change, the heavens must be made of a separate, immutable, and perfect substance. The Mad Lad would propose a 5th element, aether, the material of heavenly bodies, which had previously been associated with fire. Seeing its late addition, however, as well as more abstract tone, this aether is usually not included in the Cool Kids Club. Together, this establishes the Western classical elements, which I will be referring to as the roots. This would remain the primary dogma in the social consciousness for thousands of years, influencing artistic and scientific endeavors across Europe and mid-Asia. However, something's brewing across the continent. In something of a cosmically humorous take on E=mc², the Chinese viewed the universal fundamentals not in primary states of matter, but in phases of changing energy. Water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. These are the Wu Jing, or the 5 changes. These phases were often arranged in a series of cycles. For example, the generating or clockwise cycle was wood feeds fire, fire creates the ashen earth, the earth bears metal ore, shaped metal collects water in the form of condensation, and water nourishes the growing wood. But by cutting across, there was also the overcoming cycle. The roots of wood part the earth absorbs water, water quenches fire, fire melts metal, and metal chops through wood. The whole system presents a sort of rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock dynamic. The selection is strange initially because it appears to exclude the classical air for 2 fairly earthy elements, metal and wood. However, this isn't exactly the case. Wood and metal were both given fairly airy connotations, with wood being associated with the wind and metal with the sky or space. Trees are seen to blow in the wind, which is fair enough, but metal fulfilled a semi-aether position due to the nature of meteoric iron. When blobs of metal were seen to fall from the sky and provide incredible durability when forged into tools and weapons, it's rational that the Chinese would associate such an important substance with a highly regarded conceptual space, like the heavens, where it had literally come from. Both the Wu Jing and the Epicletian roots saw application in the fields of medical theory, mapped onto various bodily functions, the humors, the seasons, the planets, directions, dynasties, fingers, animal senses, organs, emotions, times of the day. If there was 4 or more of a thing, you could probably slap an element on it. Of course, there is more to the world than just Athens and China. Not much, but it's there. Most other cultures arrived at fairly similar conclusions to the Greek or Chinese, like the Hindu, who had various systems even within their own doctrines. The Chandogya Upanishad, an old Sanskrit text of religious significance, supposed the 3 gunas: red, fire, white, water, and black, earth. These were aligned with each of the 3 castes in the caste system, but would later be expanded upon, possibly in exposure to Greek ideology. With this expansion, I find that the Hindu had an interesting take on the elements in the matter of sensation. They had Aristotle's classical elements, but arranged in order of how they could or could not be perceived. Earth, or bhumi, can be smelled, tasted, seen, touched, and heard. Water, called ap or jala, can also be tasted, seen, touched, and heard, but it has no odor, so it can't be smelled. Likewise, fire had no taste, air can't be seen, and the highest element, aether or void, can only be heard, which is pretty neat. Early Hinduism also provides the 7 chakras, which can each be seen as aligning with an element, or at least domains of the world. The crown aligned with time or space or some sort of cosmic or universal force. The third eye was the nether, dark, shadow, and death. The throat was aether, life, light, lightning, electricity, and energy. Heart was air and wind. The navel was fire, heat, the flame. The sacral was water and ice and snow alongside steam and fog and mist, and while the root was earth, plants, rock, and the soil. Lastly, Buddhism, in a sort of six-element system dividing the realms of reality, added consciousness as a sixth element to the Aristotelian model. There's more to be explained there, but this is a 5-part series as is, so let's go ahead and talk alchemy. Arabian alchemist Jabir ibn Hayyan was a pioneer in the field of chemical extraction and practical alchemical theory. His study of the Greeks led him to Aristotelian elemental theory, specifically the aspect of the senses. His reasoning was, if the composition of lead made it cold and dry, and the composition of gold made it warm and wet, because those are the words I would first choose to describe those substances, then by rearranging the elements of which they were composed, he could transmute one substance into another. This concept would inspire the eventual pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone, which could turn lead to gold. To adapt the elemental system to his alchemical uses, he created 2 new elements: sulfur, which represented the principle of combustion, and mercury, which represented the metallic properties. As his work spread, a 3rd element, salt, which represented solidity, would be added to create what Swiss alchemist Paracelsus would call the tria prima, or the 3 primes. As alchemy progressed, various important substances to the craft, like gold, tin, lithium, silver, and a plethora of other substances, would be included under the term element, expanding it to more closely resemble the periodic table of which we know today. Speaking of which, we finally arrive at the chemical elements, derived from alchemy, the new scientific method, and the associated process of empirical testing and classification. On the most part, these elements have lost all fantastical nature. They are part of a new worldview, one ruled by the law of rigid experimentation, technological development, and the pursuit of scientific knowledge separate from philosophy and theology. For better or worse, who can say? There's 118 chemical elements at the moment, taking the cake for the largest total number of elements in any system ever. However, for as much as we've expanded that list in the 20th and 21st centuries, it may very well be possible that we've reached full volume. The behavior of subatomic particles is very complicated, but we may be at a point where it is physically impossible to bind more protons and neutrons and electrons into a single atom, at least with how we understand the laws of physics. And that's a remarkable feat in itself, and a relief to chemistry textbook designers everywhere, but it's somewhat sad to know that this historic tradition of expanding the range of elements may soon be coming to a close. But with that said, I believe this video is also coming to a close. Part 1 has shown us the trajectory of elemental theory across time and culture, and the tenets established here will have great ramifications for the later parts of this series. By the way, subscribe so you don't miss them. I can't promise timely uploads, but I can promise that this will be the sort of content that will make you freak out.